Education, they say, is the best legacy. Thus, the need for workers to be empowered on the need to strengthen the unions. Hello and welcome to Labour Lens. I am Sharon Ijason. We also have interesting news stories for you. We will be right back.
There is victory for us.
The recent tax review exercise carried out by the federal government is not going down well with these workers of the Nigeria Postal Service. The finance bill recently passed by the National Assembly is the cause of their worry. The bill seeks to rejuvenate Nigeria's tax collection system and proposes that FIRS be made to collect the stamp duty, hitherto the statutory responsibility of NIPOST. But the workers insist taking off stamp duty collection from NIPOST will render more than 10,000 of them jobless.
Just as are we saying that the Honorable Minister has a plan to take all revenue generating agencies, collapse them and send their responsibility to inland revenue so that these people will have no more job.
From the press conference, the workers proceeded to the Federal Ministry of Finance to register their displeasure. The Minister of Finance, accompanied by the Permanent Secretary and the Information and Culture Minister, addresses the workers.
Major interest is to enhance revenue, because we need to do that to move our federation forward. Our revenues have been underperforming, specifically the stamp duties, because of litigation between two government agencies.
Mrs. Hamid wants the workers to present to her office a position paper to be tabled before the National Tax Review Committee for a likely review.
I want a documented case that I can use to escalate the case that you're making.
She has assured us that the matter is not foreclosed and that it's open to further discussion and deliberation. Yes. And she has requested for a position paper from the union, which we have promised to give to her before the close of work tomorrow. So after that, whatever happens thereafter is what will determine whether we can still continue to trust them.
They're animals, they're thieves. They only sit under the AC. Why would we be going around looking for drivers for them?
Promoters of OPay Lagos, a leading brand for transportation and other services, staged a protest against the management of the company, demanding the payment of their salaries owed for 3 months.
The same offer letters, 50,000, but at the end of the month, I don't even see up to 40. When you ask them, they will tell you that it's pension. Can you collect a pension whereby you didn't give any pension form to fill? We are calling on Nigerians, our government. They should do something. This is our China's. They can't come to our own land and use us as slaves. We can't be slaves in our own father's land.
We suffered for this job. Some of us work morning till evening. We spend money on our data. We spend money on transport, and yet nothing to show for it. So we are calling on the government to try and help us.
Many of the workers were seen chanting words like OPay is a scam. They want their salaries paid immediately, which according to them is 50,000 naira excluding commission. They insist that though they are contract staff, they signed an agreement which the management is yet to meet up with. I made effort to get the management of OPay operations for comment, but was refused entry. Workers want relevant authorities to intervene. Members of the Non-Academic Staff Union of Education Institutions of Nigeria, NASU, have concluded the 2019 Quadrennial Delegate Conference of the association. Over 600 delegates from across Nigeria's 36 states gathered in Abuja to hear about the progress made by NASU and debate the future of the union for the next 4 years.
At the heart of our daily advocacy and struggle is improved salary, wages, allowances and other conditions of service of our members, as well as the security of their jobs. The leadership of the union, in order to pilot the affairs of the union towards fulfilling the aims and objectives of the union, has faced and continued to face very serious challenges from within and outside the union. These challenges notwithstanding, the union has recorded tremendous achievements.
The conference, with the theme Funding Education, Health Research Institutions and Other Social Services in a Depressed Economy, Challenges and Prospects, had in attendance speakers who outlined the challenges faced by Nigerian workers in the education sector. Such challenges include privatization, lack of funding and precarious work.
Health, research, housing, security and environment is only marginally, if at all, related to economic depression or recession. The reduced funding in education, health, and research in our country is only marginally related to the question of economic depression.
And this precarity undermines the dignity of workers. It exists only to increase the control of employers over employees, and it undermines our ability to organise and form unions. And we must fight this precarity whenever and whenever it occurs. We must force employers to create permanent jobs. We must demand that governments outlaw casual work where it is not necessary. PSI is fighting at the International Labour Organisation against all forms of precarious work in favour of workers' right to strike and to form unions and to collectively bargaining.
The constant disregard to implementation of agreement and meet the demands of workers makes the learning environment precarious. In spite of these challenges, I salute the patriotism of NASU, who remain dedicated to working without ceasing, working without shrinking responsibility to the next generation of Nigerians.
The governor of Edo State, Godwin Obaseki, who declared the conference open, spoke on the world of workplace and the minimum wage struggle in Nigeria.
For me personally, I don't think the emphasis should be on a 30,000 minimum wage. The emphasis should be on improving the environment in which workers work, such that they can be more productive and justify what we pay. 30,000 naira, you will agree with me, cannot take workers home.
Public Service Assistant General Secretary also attended the conference and spoke about effects of underfunding in the education sector, protection of workers from casualization, privatization of education in Africa, and the need to make corporations pay their fair share of tax to fund public services.
NASU is uniquely placed to pronounce on the critical question of funding for public services, given its vantage position in the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels of our educational system, be it in the university, polytechnic, or colleges of educations, in the teaching hospitals, and in research institutions. The diverse nature of the union's membership base in 7 different trade groups makes it a voice that is compelling to listen to in the national discourse on how to pull our country out of its current doldrums in the funding of these critical institutions which are essential in the regeneration of our society.
It was concluded at the conference that the labor movement in general should rise in unison and challenge insensitivity of government to the tax burden that is piling more pressure on the limited income of Nigerians. in TV segments this week, I will be speaking with the General Secretary of NASU, Comrade Peters Adeyemi, who also doubles up as the Africa Vice President of Public Service International, spoke about the several challenges workers in the sector of educational, health, and research are faced with. We will be right back. It's good to have you on the program.
It's my pleasure.
A lot has happened in the last couple of years in the education sector, and your sector is actually unique because you're not just talking about education, you have also associated institutions. How would you rate your sector in the last 4 years?
Well, I think some considerable progress made, but I think this year, particularly this year that is going to an end, we didn't record any remarkable progress. In areas of the enhancement of the living standards of our members in universities, polytechnics, colleges of education, research institutes, nothing much has happened. And the welfare and the well-being of our members is on the downturn, unfortunately. I think the economic situation has also not helped. The value of our currency has also been a problem. So the take-home pay can no longer take these workers to even the bus stop. And the cost of living, you also find out that in the last couple of months or weeks, inflation has been going up rather than coming down, and that has been a major problem. So it's clearly worrisome. We have managed to reduce strikes in the system, hoping that federal government, state governments, local governments, and our employers will appreciate the pains that we are going through and come to our aid. But unfortunately, we are not getting the type of response that we are expected to be getting from them. Agreements signed are not implemented, unfortunately. Agreements that are due for renegotiation are not being renegotiated. It's quite frustrating. Even the minimum wage that the NLC and the TUC fought for, we have not seen employers of labor and government itself, particularly at the states, effecting payment. And meanwhile, market women, landlords, and everybody are already having a field day, increasing their rents, transporters increasing their fares, and all the rest of it. So Nigerian workers, particularly in our sector, are facing very, very serious economic crisis.
During the 7th Delegate Quadrennial Delegate Conference, the theme the union actually had was funding education, health, research institution, and other social services in a depressed economy. How true is it that our economy is depressed?
Well, if the government, you will talk about depressed economy because things are not happening on the positive side. And honestly, for us as union people, it's difficult for us to agree when government says that we're out of depression. We're out of depression. How? The living standard of a common man has not improved. So how do you justify that? What you allocate to education has not improved. What you allocate to the health sector is not near what is recommended to be allocated. And meanwhile, you find that a whole chunk of money is allocated to other sectors that are less important. So for us, it's really problematic. So it was a deliberate design that we should have this team to awaken the consciousness of those who are supposed to respond positively to the issue of funding of education, the health sector, and research and other social services. Because the life of every Nigerian depends on this. We can't see how anybody in this country can make progress without education. The country itself cannot develop without research. And then you can't also afford a situation where our our citizens continue to embark on pilgrimage abroad for healthcare. You can't even afford the amount. It's those who have made all the money that can even afford money to go outside the country to go and seek for healthcare. If you look at what the airlines are charging now, it's cutthroat. So we as commoners have to remain here, and we have to insist that our health sectors must be looked at, our hospitals, the standard of our hospitals must be improved upon, so that we can assess the type of healthcare attention that will make us to be good citizens, healthy citizens, that can also work for the improvement of our economy.
Casualization, outsourcing, insourcing of workers seems to be the order of the day. Like I've learned during the conference, not just in Nigeria, in Africa. You're also the president of PSI. Can you tell us, especially for your union also, where there are some peculiar essential services which has been outsourced to other services? What's your take on it?
We've been fighting on the issue of casualization and outsourcing. It's clearly an exploitative tendencies on the part of employers. You want to use the same worker with all the prerequisite qualifications and what have you, to do a job of a regular pensionable worker, whereas you pay that worker peanut and you just say they are casuals. But you expect them to do all the jobs of a pensionable staff. It's exploitative. It's clearly exploitative. And that's why over a period of time, NASU and other unions in the NLC have engaged employers, either through picketing and otherwise, on the need for them to abolish the issue of casualization. Casualization is in itself a slave trade in the respective organization. You try to get people, able-bodied people, to work for you, and you pay them peanuts. They don't have a future. You can fire them anytime. So for us, it's a big problem that we continue to fight. We are not going to relent, because we know that in normal climes, this doesn't happen. When you employ people who have all the prerequisites, you put them on pensionable appointment. And unfortunately, some institutions will even collect money as if they are collecting this money. They do budget, which they submit, as if this budget is meant for pensionable employees. And then they fiddle around with the money and come and pay these casual workers peanuts. So for us, it's criminal. It's not something that any trade union man can accept. We are not accepting it. In fact, it's even worse. How do you do casualization in the education sector, in the health sector, in research? It's clearly something that is unacceptable. And I think we are fighting it. It's not only in Nigeria, it's like you mentioned. We have seen it in other countries in Africa. And PSI, through the fact that we work across the globe, we have been sharing knowledge, sharing research work. We are contending with it, we are fighting it, we are making progress, but we know that we have not reached where we are expected to be.
There is this ongoing conversation of African workers collaborating together to harness its potential. What would be your recommendation as the president of PSI?
Certainly, that's the way to go. Because the capital, the employers, governments within the continent, within the globe, they are meeting, they are exchanging notes, they are agreeing on how to further, worsen the living conditions of Nigerian of workers across the continent and the globe. They are implementing policies that are unfriendly. Very unfriendly economic policies are being implemented. If you see one happening in Nigeria today, you see the same thing replicated in Uganda, replicated in Kenya. So clearly, capital, employers, governments are sharing notes. They compare notes. And their strategies are virtually the same. So it's becoming very obvious that except the workers within the continent and within the globe are able to bury their hatchet and unite to be able to confront. That's what we are planning and we are trying to do in PSI. We use the platform of the PSI to, assemble information about what happens in various countries within the continent in terms of welfare packages, in terms of even minimum wage, whatever and whatever, trade union rights violation, issues of tax justice, and all the rest of it. And we think it's important for us to come together, speak with one voice. We are even exploring the possibility that if workers in the education sector in Nigeria is on strike over demands that are very serious, we can get our counterparts in Ghana, in Kenya, in Uganda, to do what we can refer to as a solidarity strike.
Talking about solidarity, during conversation by Professor Oluye, he mentioned that there's this issue of workers across different sectors, even within Nigeria, not wanting to collaborate. He reinstated the fact that an injury to one is an injury to all. What's your take on this?
I think that's also the manipulative tendencies of the employers. Employer will tell you that we encourage this group not to collaborate with the other ones because they know that in collaboration there is strength. They can say, look, if they are on strike over there. In fact, we see it in our union. If there is strike in the federal universities, the state university will be asking the question, why will you have to be on strike over matters that affects the federal? Forgetting that an injury to one is an injury to all. So we realize that there is need for us not to allow the employers or government to continue to divide us. That's one thing. It may take some time for us to reach a perfect level. But I think we are working hard. Working hard in the sense that even crisis, economic crisis, poverty, it will force the trade union to come together. Because if you do it individually or as individual unions and you know you are not achieving results, you have to look for a better option. And in collaboration, you are stronger. And the effect and the impact of whatever action you take tend to bite more than when you go solo. When you go solo, the impact may not be as when it's like when an industrial union embarks on a strike, you can't compare the effect with when NLC go on strike. But I think we'll get to a point that the NLC will have to develop a strategy where if 3 or 4 of its affiliates, like we have in the education sector, are having problems, there's no reason why they cannot call the other unions to collaborate. Because you can move that strategy if you do it in the education sector and succeed. You can move it to the health sector where you have about 4 or 5 of the NLC affiliates. Because we have been on the case of Joesu for over a period of time and we are not getting results.
Talking about strategy, there's this trend of labor now is not the banging table labor. Labor prefers to lobby. And we've learned from some unionists also that for us to move forward or for the labor sector to move forward, for workers to get decent wage or decent work in the work environment, that you might actually have to bring out your placards once again and to get what you want from the government or the employers of labor. Absolutely, because you find that there was a time we were also looking at the fact that going on strike every day in itself may not be yielding the desired result, because it was like, okay, the employers of labor and government already know that if they push the unions up to a point, they go on strike. And most times you go on strike, they just ignore the unions. They ignore the unions. So we're thinking that probably it would be better to develop other strategies. But the other strategies are also not working. So you find that the most potent weapon, no matter what anybody say anywhere, the most potent weapon that a trade union has is the strike. Strike, protest, and when you talk about lobbying, it looks a little bit difficult. Whom are you going to lobby? Most of these guys, you say you want to go and lobby somebody in National Assembly, and National Assembly talk to the executive. They don't listen. How do you lobby a minister who already made up his mind that he cannot yield ground? So you find that, and if realistically what we see today is that
employers of labor and the government are not ready to listen until when they see a potential threat to stoppage of work.
So what will be your expectations for 2020 in the labor sector?
My expectation for 2020 is that the labor movement will have to tighten its belt. We have to, whatever means, whether it's by strike, by protest, or by campaigns, we have to insist that what is due to Nigerian workers or to workers in different sectors are released to them. There can't be any other thing. Even minimum wage. It's not, some state government are talking from both sides of their mouth. 30,000 minimum wage, and some states said cannot pay. And meanwhile, transporters, landlords, market women have already jacked up the prices of commodities. So it's double jeopardy. The workers are not getting the minimum wage, and they are paying more. Inflation is on the rise. The last couple of months, the Federal Office of Statistics is releasing information that inflation is going up. How do we contend with that? So in 2020, I'm not an apostle of doom. I think that if care is not taken, you may witness more strike in the country. That's the truth.
It was an interesting conversation I had with you.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember, labor creates wealth.